It was a bitterly cold evening. It's the kind that made steam rise from the city streets and made even the busiest commuters hunch their shoulders. At a crowded bus stop, Daniel, a young man dressed in a thin jacket and worn boots, noticed a woman shivering on the edge of the platform. Her coat was elegant, but clearly not enough for the piercing wind, and she hugged herself tightly, teeth chattering as she waited for the next bus. Without thinking, Daniel stepped forward and removed his own jacket, holding it out toward her. "Here, take this," he said softly, unsure if she would accept. The woman hesitated, glancing at him, her eyes scanning him with a mix of surprise and curiosity. But eventually she allowed him to drape the warm fabric around her shoulders. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice faint, almost drowned by the rush of traffic and the distant hum of the subway. Daniel smiled awkwardly, scratching the back of his neck. He had noticed her from across the street, a figure standing out amid the gray crowd. And something about her vulnerability pulled him in. The wind whipped harder, tugging at her hair, and he instinctively moved closer, shielding her from the gust. She looked up at him, and for a fleeting second, he thought he saw a flicker of recognition. Though he assumed it was only gratitude for the jacket, neither of them knew that this brief moment at the bus stop would mark the beginning of a life-changing connection. The bus arrived with a squeal of brakes, its headlights cutting through the foggy night. Daniel offered her a polite nod and prepared to step back into the cold himself, but she hesitated, as if reluctant to leave. Finally, she spoke, her voice more confident now. "You didn't have to do that." Daniel shrugged, smiling. "I couldn't just watch you freeze. It's nothing." She studied him for a long moment, taking in his worn shoes, the creases in his jacket, and the earnestness in his expression. What she didn't reveal was that she was not an ordinary passerby. She was Claire Hastings, the CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country, known for her sharp business mind and no-nonsense demeanor. As the bus doors closed and she disappeared into the crowd, Daniel resumed his walk home, unaware that his simple gesture had made a profound impression. Claire, meanwhile, found herself thinking about the young man who had offered warmth without expectation, a rarity in her world of calculated handshakes and strategic deals. She realized that in that brief moment, someone had seen her as a human being first, not as a powerful executive. And it left her strangely unsettled, but intrigued. The city's lights flickered against the pavement, echoing the strange mixture of warmth and curiosity that had begun to grow inside her. Over the next few days, Claire couldn't shake the image of him from her mind, the gentle eyes, the hesitant smile, the effortless kindness. She mentioned the encounter to her assistant, who laughed softly. "It's probably meaningless," she said, but Claire felt differently. In a life where every interaction was transactional, Daniel's act had been genuine. On a whim, she decided to track him down, starting with the bus stop where their paths had crossed. Hours of subtle inquiries led her to a modest apartment building near the outskirts of the city, a place she would never have expected someone like him to live. The next evening, Claire returned to the same bus stop. Pretending to wait for her driver while scanning the crowd for the young man who had offered her his jacket, Daniel appeared, carrying a small grocery bag. Looking as ordinary as ever, unaware that the woman he had helped was now observing him. When he caught her gaze, she smiled, and he returned it cautiously, unsure why this stranger seemed so familiar. "Hi," she said, stepping closer. "I'm Claire. We met here a few days ago." Daniel blinked, then nodded, memory clicking into place. "Oh, right, the jacket," he said, a sheepish grin forming. They walked together along the street, talking about trivial things at first, the weather, the city. The crowded buses before conversation shifted naturally to deeper topics, their dreams, their struggles, and the unexpected turns life had taken. Claire listened to Daniel's stories of odd jobs, small triumphs, and moments of quiet self-reliance. Feeling a warmth in her chest that went beyond the jacket he had offered, Daniel in turn found himself intrigued by her intelligence and sincerity. Noticing that despite her polished exterior, she seemed remarkably human and approachable. The connection grew quietly, but powerfully, as if fate had placed them together to remind each other of what real kindness could feel like. Weeks turned into months. Their relationship deepened. Daniel, still humble and grounded, never let Claire's status intimidate him, and she never let his modest life make her condescending. They spent late evenings wandering the city streets, sharing meals at hole-in-the-wall diners, and laughing over small adventures that felt larger because they were together. Claire began to realize that this young man, whom she might never have noticed in another context, had transformed her understanding of trust, connection, and the simple beauty of selfless kindness. Eventually, Claire invited Daniel to a company gala, a glittering event where CEOs, investors, and media personalities mingled in crystal chandeliers and flowing champagne. He arrived in a borrowed suit, looking both nervous and determined. As the night progressed, people whispered about her companion, curious how such an unassuming young man had captured the attention of one of the country's most powerful executives. But Daniel didn't care about the whispers. He only cared that Claire had invited him into her world, bridging to lives that seemed entirely separate, yet now intertwined by fate and generosity. Years later, Daniel and Claire often returned to that same bus stop on cold evenings, laughing as they watched commuters rush by, scarves and jackets flapping in the wind. The memory of that first act, a simple gesture of warmth and concern, remained at the heart of their story. A reminder that small kindnesses could ripple outward and change lives in ways no one could predict. Together, they had built a life rooted in mutual respect, love, and shared values, proving that sometimes offering a jacket to a stranger is the beginning of a story that could transform to worlds forever. Years later, Daniel and Claire often reflected on that cold evening at the bus stop that had changed everything. Daniel had grown into a confident entrepreneur, inspired by Claire's guidance and his own determination, while Claire had learned the value of humility, kindness, and seeing people beyond their titles. Together, they launched a foundation to support underprivileged youth, helping them find opportunities and mentorship, giving back the same warmth and care that had brought them together. Every time they walked past that bus stop, now just a mundane corner in a bustling city, they remembered how a simple act of offering a jacket had sparked a connection that transformed their lives forever, proving that courage and compassion could ripple far beyond a single moment. On a crisp winter morning, Daniel and Claire returned to the very bus stop where it all began. Now accompanied by children and volunteers from their foundation, the group handed out warm coats, scarves, blankets to anyone shivering in the cold, turning a place of routine waiting into a beacon of hope. Claire watched Daniel help a young boy pull a jacket over his shoulders, smiling just as he had done for her years ago. In that moment, she realized that one simple gesture, the offer of warmth to a stranger, had not only changed their lives, but had created a legacy of kindness, teaching everyone present that even the smallest acts could spark profound, lasting change. Months later, the impact of their foundation began to show tangible results. Teens who had once faced bleak futures now attended school regularly, discovered hidden talents, and dreamed bigger than they ever thought possible. Daniel and Claire visited local shelters, mentoring the youth personally, sharing their story of chance and compassion to inspire resilience. Every time a young person's eyes lit up with hope, they were reminded of that single moment at the bus stop, the moment when generosity met necessity, and how it had grown into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Their lives had intertwined in ways neither could have foreseen, and together they continued to prove that kindness has the power to transform entire communities. One evening, as snow fell softly over the city streets, Daniel and Claire hosted a small gala at their foundation's headquarters. Celebrating the achievements of the youth they had helped, volunteers, donors, and the teenagers themselves gathered, their laughter and excitement filling the room with warmth. Claire looked around at the smiling faces, many of whom reminded her of herself, vulnerable, uncertain, yet full of potential. Daniel squeezed her hand, and together they realized that the ripple effect of a simple act of kindness, the jacket on a freezing night, had created a network of hope, opportunity, and love that extended far beyond their own lives. It was a reminder that small gestures, when combined with compassion and commitment, could truly change the world. Years later, Daniel and Claire often returned to that quiet corner of the city where their story began, sometimes in silence, sometimes laughing as they watched people hurry past. They would point out the children they had helped, the small businesses started by young adults they had mentored, and the countless lives touched by their foundation. Every coat, every warm meal, every word of encouragement traced back to that single night when Daniel offered his jacket to a Shivering.